If this story hits close to home, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. She said it while I was standing at the sink, watching the water run over my hands. Not a shout, not a whisper, just a flat, declarative sentence, delivered the way you'd read a number off a receipt. My life would be easier without you. I turned off the tap. I picked up my keys, and 20 minutes later, when she tried to leave for her yoga class, she discovered that every lock, every account, every access code in that house had already been changed. She just didn't know it yet. My name is Elliot Marsh. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 18 months, I had been quietly, methodically, and without any visible emotion, building the exit that morning required. I work in cold storage distribution, not the kind of job people ask about at dinner parties, but the kind that keeps the world running. I managed logistics for a regional warehouse network, temperature control systems, route optimization, compliance protocols, the machinery of food supply, things that couldn't fail. I was good at it, precise, patient, thorough. My wife Sandra used to joke that I treated our marriage like a refrigerated shipment, always monitoring, always adjusting. She stopped joking around year 10. By year 14, she'd stopped bringing it up at all. We had 2 kids, Mara, 15, with the kind of sharp intelligence that makes adults slightly uneasy. Cole, 13, quiet in the way that meant he was taking everything in and filing it somewhere you'd never find. They were the reason I stayed as long as I did. That, and the particular kind of stubbornness that convinces a man that if he just holds the line long enough, the other person will eventually come back to him. They don't. The morning it ended was a Tuesday, October 5th. I remember because I'd been tracking everything by date for the previous year and a half, and that Tuesday was the last data point I ever needed. Sandra came into the kitchen already dressed for her class, phone in one hand, car keys in the other. She moved past me like I was a piece of furniture, opened the cabinet for her travel mug, and didn't look at me once. "You forgot the trash again," she said. I glanced at the bin. "It's not full. I'll take it out tonight." "You said that yesterday." "Because it wasn't full yesterday either." She set her mug down harder than she needed to. "Just forget it. I'll do it myself, like everything else." There it was, that sentence. The one that always arrived, carrying more freight than it announced. I turned off the tap and faced her. "What's actually going on?" She looked at me then. Not the distracted, peripheral look I'd gotten used to, but a direct, full-face look. And what I found in her eyes wasn't frustration, wasn't unresolved anger. It was something worse. It was nothing. A complete and total absence of investment. "My life would be easier without you," she said. Flatly, cleanly. The way you'd read the temperature off a thermostat. I stood there and let the words settle over me. 16 years, 2 kids, a mortgage, a shared calendar. Thousands of small arguments resolved and forgotten. A history that had its own weight and density. All of it reduced to one sentence. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to take it back. I nodded once, dried my hands on the dish towel, and walked out the front door. It was 7:43 in the morning. I didn't look back. I drove to a parking area by a creek called Harker's Run, about 15 minutes from the house. It's the kind of spot that locals know and never mention, tucked behind the shell of an old textile mill that shut down decades ago. I backed into a space facing the water, rolled down my window, and pulled out the second phone. Not the iPhone Sandra knew about, the prepaid device I'd been carrying for the past year, registered under a business name I'd dissolved 3 months before. I opened a custom app I'd built myself. Clean interface, 1 button. I'd labeled it Reset. My thumb sat over it for maybe 3 seconds. Then I pressed it. What happened next had taken 18 months to build, and it executed in under 6 minutes. The first action the script triggered was a cascading password reset across every device and system tied to our home network. The router, the smart thermostat, the security cameras, the garage door interface. The smart locks I'd installed the previous Christmas. Sandra had thought they were a gift for the house. They were, just not for her. Second, the banking architecture I'd spent 6 months restructuring completed its final transition. The joint checking account Sandra believed we still shared equally had been quietly reclassified. I was listed as primary holder. She was listed as authorized user. Past tense, effective 8:03 that morning. Third, a sequence of pre-drafted, pre-notarized letters went out automatically to our insurance carrier, our mortgage lender, and 3 utility providers. Each one was a formal notice of legal separation, dated and signed 14 months ago during a business trip to Harrisburg that hadn't really been a business trip. My attorney, a man named Dennis Farrow, had everything: recorded conversations, financial records, photographs of wire transfers Sandra had made that I'd traced to a source she'd never mentioned, screenshots of text exchanges she thought had been deleted. I hadn't been surveilling her. I had been building a case the way I built every logistics system, with redundancy, precision, and no single point of failure. I sat by the creek and watched the water move, checked my watch. 8:14. She'd be trying to leave for yoga right about now. My phone buzzed. The iPhone. Sandra's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. It buzzed again, and again. By the 4th call, I powered the iPhone off completely and slipped it into the glove box. The prepaid stayed on. I opened my email and watched the confirmations arrive in sequence. Insurance carrier, policy restructured, single primary holder, effective immediately. Bank, access credentials updated, secondary user status revoked. Mortgage lender, primary contact information modified, documentation on file. Each one felt like a door closing. Not slamming, just pulling shut, mechanism engaging, lock clicking into place. I thought about Mara and Cole. They were at school. Mara had early band practice. Cole had tutoring. Neither of them knew what their mother had said to me that morning. Neither of them knew what I'd been building for the past year and a half. But they were about to find out. And what happened in that house over the next 8 hours would change all of us in ways I hadn't fully prepared for, including myself. Sandra stood in the garage and stared at the keypad. She'd entered the code 3 times, the same 4-digit combination they'd used for 8 years, the one my pareja embedded in muscle memory. She'd never had to think about it. Each time, the display flashed red and went dark. She tried pulling out her phone, opening the garage door application. Connection failed. She tapped it again. Same result. Back inside, she grabbed her laptop from the kitchen island and opened the browser. Bank account. She typed her credentials, saved in the autofill for 2 years. Invalid credentials. She typed them manually, slowly, character by character. Same message. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Linda. Something about Thursday lunch. Sandra dismissed it and called my number. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. A 3rd time. Nothing. She opened her email. The first message was from Vantage Life Insurance. Subject line, policyholder update, action required. She opened it. The language was formal, dense. She had to read it twice before the meaning began assembling itself into something real. Primary holder restructured. Marital separation documentation received. Policy status updated, effective immediately. Her hands were already shaking when she opened the second email. First National Credit Union. Joint account status modified. New credentials required for secondary access. Third, the mortgage company. Primary contact information changed per documentation on file. She sat down at the kitchen table. The thermostat on the wall blinked. Then, without warning, the temperature reading jumped from 72 degrees to 85. She walked over and punched in the code. The screen flashed. Administrator access required. She tried twice more. Denied both times. The front door smart lock showed the same message. The Wi-Fi network on her phone, though the signal bar showed full connectivity, refused to load any page. She checked the network name. It had changed overnight. The name she recognized was gone. In its place, something that meant nothing to her. By 9:30, she had called me 17 times. She had sent 12 text messages that began with confusion and accelerated to something that looked like panic. What is happening? This is insane. You can't lock me out of my own house. I'm calling my attorney. I didn't respond to any of them. At 10:15, she called her mother. I knew this because Dennis Farrow had arranged with his contact at the phone carrier to flag calls to certain numbers, all within the parameters of the legal separation notice I'd filed the previous spring. Her mother told her to calm down, told her I was probably just blowing off steam and would be home by dinner. Sandra didn't tell her mother what she'd said to me that morning. She said we'd had a disagreement. By 11 o'clock, Sandra was sitting on the living room couch staring at the wall, not crying, just sitting. The house felt different, she'd later admit. Same rooms, same furniture, same late October light coming through the windows. But something structural had shifted, the way a building settles after the load-bearing wall is removed. She understood in that moment that this wasn't a fight, this wasn't me making a point, this was a conclusion, and I had written it long before she handed me the last line. Remember, all the links and resources I mention, from career tools to personal development guides, are in the description and pinned comment below. Mara came home first, around 3:40. She dropped her backpack by the door and moved automatically toward the kitchen, pulling out her phone. She stopped when she saw Sandra at the table, surrounded by printed documents from the accounts she could still partially access. "Mom." Mara's voice had that particular teenage register that holds both concern and accusation in the same syllable. "Why are you just sitting there?" Sandra looked up. Her eyes were red at the edges. "Have you heard from your father?" "No." "Why?" "He left this morning. He won't answer his phone." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Left like actually left?" "I don't know." Something moved across Mara's face. Not sadness. Something harder and more considered. "What did you say to him?" The question landed like a flat stone. "What? What did you say to him?" Mara said it again without inflection, as a statement. "Dad doesn't just disappear. Mi pareja, what happened?" "Mara, that's not something you need to." "I got an email from him." Mara held up her phone. Sandra went pale. Mara read in silence for a moment, then looked up. "He says he's okay. He loves us. He says to look at a folder he made for us." She tapped the screen a few times. Then her expression changed entirely. She turned the phone around. It showed a shared Google Drive folder, titled simply, "For Mara and Cole." Inside, bank records, copies of text exchanges, hotel receipts with dates and locations, calendar screenshots, all of it labeled, all of it organized with the precision of someone who had spent 18 months making sure nothing could be disputed. Mara scrolled without speaking. Her face grew still and set. "You've been meeting someone," she said finally. Sandra's voice fractured. "It's not what you—" "There are receipts here, Mom. 3 different hotels, all in the last 6 months. Mara's hands were trembling slightly. "He knew. He's known this whole time." The front door opened. Cole walked in with his earbuds in, oblivious. He pulled them out when he registered the silence. "What's going on?" Mara handed him the phone without a word. He read, scrolled, read more. His jaw tightened in a way that made Sandra's throat close, because it was exactly the way I tighten mine. He looked at Sandra. "Is this real?" "Cole, let me explain. Did you cheat on Dad?" "It's complicated." "That's not an answer." His voice was quiet and controlled in a way that was somehow worse than shouting. "Did you cheat on him?" The silence answered for her. Cole handed the phone back to Mara. "I'm going to my room." "Cole, wait." He was already on the stairs. A moment later, his door closed. Not a slam, just a click. Final. Mara looked at her mother for a long moment. "You told him his life would be easier without him, didn't you?" Sandra flinched. "How could you possibly?" "Because that's what you always say." Mara's voice broke slightly on the last word, then steadied. "You said it about Grandma. You said it about your job. You said it about the dog we had to give away when we moved." She picked up her backpack. "I'm going to Haley's. Mara, please. I don't want to be here right now." She moved toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the frame. She didn't turn around. "You know what the worst part is? He never said a single bad thing about you. Not to us, not once. He just left. She paused. I don't blame him. The door closed. Sandra stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by paper and evidence and the wreckage of a structure she had quietly dismantled over 14 months without ever once asking herself what would be left when it fell. I spent that first night at a motel off Route 40, the kind of place that charges by the week, asks no questions if you pay cash, and smells like industrial carpet cleaner and old heat. The room had a bed, a bathroom, a small desk by the window, and nothing else. No memories. That was the part that mattered. I sat at the desk with my laptop open and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining since the day I understood that my marriage had already ended. I just hadn't yet filed the documentation to make it official. Phase 1, complete. Accounts separated. Access revoked. Formal separation triggered across all relevant institutions. Phase 2, already in motion. I'd signed a 6-month consulting contract with a man named Victor Shen 3 weeks prior. He ran a mid-size cold storage operation in the next county and needed someone who understood distribution from the inside out. It wasn't a large number, but it was enough to rent an apartment, establish a routine, and start again from ground level. My phone buzzed. Text from Dennis Farrow. Her attorney made contact, declined engagement on the off-the-cuff terms they proposed. Your documentation packet has been forwarded. They're scrambling. I typed back. The kids. His response came in under a minute. Emails delivered as scheduled. No legal complications with disclosure. Everything you sent them was factual, documented, and sourced from materials you had legal access to. I set the phone down. Mara and Cole had the folder by now. They'd seen the text exchanges between Sandra and a man named Derek Calloway, a fitness instructor she'd met through the yoga studio. They'd seen the hotel receipts from nights Sandra had claimed to be at her sister's. They'd seen the cash withdrawals I'd traced and documented over 11 months. I hadn't wanted them to find out this way. I hadn't wanted them to find out at all. But Sandra had made that particular choice unavoidable when she decided our marriage was a negotiable arrangement and that honesty was a preference rather than a condition. My phone buzzed again. Mara this time. Dad, where are you? I stared at the message, then I typed, I'm safe, I'm okay. I'm sorry you had to see those documents. 3 dots. Then, are they real? Yes. A longer pause. Then, I'm mi pare sorry, Dad. My throat tightened. Not your fault, sweetheart. None of this is on you. Can I see you soon? I promise. I just need a few days to find a place. Is Cole okay? He won't come out of his room. He won't talk to her. Tell him I love him. Tell him I'll call tomorrow. Okay? Love you, Dad. Love you too. I set the phone on the desk and sat in the silence of that motel room, the rattle of the heater, the low rumble of highway traffic outside the window, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. It was heavy. It wasn't wrong. Tomorrow I'd find an apartment. Something clean and functional with enough space that Mara and Cole could visit without feeling like they were stepping into a crime scene. Tonight I just sat there, in that room with its smell of old carpet and its absence of anything familiar, and breathed, just breathed. For the first time in years, that was enough. Natalie, Sandra's attorney, had recommended Brian Kessler. He was younger than Sandra expected, mid-40s, with the particular polish that comes from winning more proceedings than you lose. He'd spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents I'd filed before he looked up. Mrs. Marsh, he said, I'm going to be direct with you. This is one of the most thoroughly prepared separation filings I've encountered in 15 years of family law. Sandra's voice was careful. What does that mean, practically? It means your husband began structuring his exit well over a year ago, possibly longer. He tapped the stack of documents with 2 fingers. These separation agreements are dated, notarized, and properly filed. The financial restructuring was executed within his legal rights as joint primary account holder. The insurance modifications followed standard protocol. Even the smart home access changes fall under property rights, given that he purchased and installed the systems. In mi pareja, I have nothing. I didn't say that, but you need to understand what we're dealing with. He opened a secondary folder. He has recorded arguments, text message screenshots, financial records showing unauthorized withdrawals, and most significantly, documented evidence of an extramarital relationship. He looked at her carefully. How much did this person know? Derek Calloway. Sandra didn't answer. She just nodded. Kessler sat back. Then we need to focus on containment, not recovery. The affair changes the asset conversation substantially. It changes the custody conversation more. Custody. The word came out of her like it had been struck loose. Your daughter is 15. Your son is 13. Judges in this state take the stated preferences of children those ages seriously, very seriously. He paused. Have they spoken to you since this began? Mara is staying with a friend. Cole barely leaves his room. Kessler made a note. Then he looked at her. I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Did you say something to your husband the morning he left? Something that could be interpreted as a request for separation? Sandra looked at her hands. I told him my life would be easier without him. Kessler was quiet for a moment. Were there witnesses? No, just him. Did you put it in writing? Text message, email, anything? No. He made another note. That's something. It becomes your word against his. But given the rest of the documentation, I wouldn't rely on that gap too heavily. He closed the folder. Here's what I need you to do. Stop all direct contact. Everything routes through me and his attorney from this point forward. Document every interaction you have with your children, every expense, every cooperative gesture, and end things with Calloway immediately. No contact of any kind. It's already been over for weeks. Good. Keep it that way. He stood. Mrs. Marsh, I'll file a response to the separation notice and request mediation. But I need you to manage your expectations. The most realistic outcome here is damage control, not resolution in your favor. Sandra left that office feeling like something had been excavated from the center of her chest. She sat in her car in the parking structure and stared through the windshield at a concrete wall for a long time. 16 years, 2 kids, a house she'd spent years furnishing and caring for, a life she'd believed was solid beneath her feet. One sentence, one 14-month decision, and now this. 3 weeks after I left, I met Mara and Cole at a diner 40 minutes from the house. A Sunday morning, the kind where the sky sits low and gray and everything feels suspended. I arrived early and took a booth by the window. Mara got there first, Cole just behind her. They both looked older than they had a month ago. Not in any dramatic way, just that specific aging that happens when something shifts in how a person understands the world. Mara hugged me hard, didn't let go for a long moment. Cole's hug was stiffer but no shorter. We ordered pancakes for Mara, eggs and bacon for Cole, coffee for me. Nobody reached for the obvious subject until the food arrived. Mom wants us to tell you to come home, Mara said, cutting her pancakes into careful squares. What do you want? I asked. She looked up. I want to know if you're actually okay. I am, I said. Better than I've been in a while. Cole was quiet for a moment, looking at his plate. She cries a lot. I know that's hard to see. It's not hard. He looked up. I just don't feel bad anymore. Is that wrong? It's honest, I said carefully. Mara set her fork down. Dad, I graduate in 2 years. I'm going to college somewhere far enough that I can actually breathe. She glanced at her brother, but Cole's stuck there for 5 more years. We've been talking. Cole nodded. I want to live with you. I hadn't expected it stated that plainly. Not because I hadn't hoped for it, but because I'd been careful not to want anything from either of them that they hadn't offered first. I mean it, he said. I can't be in that house anymore. She keeps trying to explain things, and every time she does it just gets worse. And I don't trust her. Have you told her that directly? She doesn't listen. Mara's voice was flat. She thinks if she apologizes enough times, everything resets. It doesn't reset. It's not going back, Cole said. I don't want it to. I looked at both of them, my kids, sitting in a Sunday morning diner, caught between 2 people they didn't ask to be born between, dealing with consequences that had nothing to do with any choice they'd made. If that's genuinely what you want, I said, I'll talk to my attorney, but it's going to get complicated. Your mother isn't going to accept this without a fight. I don't care, Cole said. I can't be there. Mara reached across the table and put her hand on mine. I'll come on weekends. I get my license next month. I can drive myself. Your mother will make this difficult. She always does, Mara said quietly. We finished breakfast. I drove them as far as the corner before their street because neither of them wanted me to pull into the driveway. Mara hugged me again before she got out. Cole paused in the door. Dad. Yeah, buddy. Thanks for not staying. He said it the way you'd say thanks for dinner. Simple and sincere and already half turned away. I know that sounds weird, but thanks. He got out before I could respond. I watched them walk down the sidewalk toward the house, shoulders straight, steps deliberate. They looked like people who had already decided something. I pulled away and called Dennis Farrow. I need to file for custody modification, I said. Not both kids. Cole. He's asked to live with me full time. Mara wants to stay neutral, visit on weekends. That's going to open a fight, Dennis said. I know, but he asked. And I'm not telling my son no when he's asking me for help. All right. I'll draft the motion. But Elliot, be ready. This is about to escalate. It's been escalating for 16 years, I said. At least now it's moving in one direction. Check the description and pinned comment for everything we recommend. Wellness, mindset, and resources for people navigating exactly what this story is about. Sandra showed up at my apartment 2 days after Dennis filed the custody motion. She didn't knock. She pounded on the door with a flat hand, the sound of someone who had moved past all the social protocols around how you ask for things. I opened it. She hadn't slept. I could see it in her face, in the way her hair was pulled back at an angle she wouldn't have chosen deliberately, in the old sweatshirt she was wearing, one I recognized from 5 years ago before any of this. You're trying to take my son, she said. Cole asked to live here. I'm honoring that. He's 13. He doesn't understand what he's asking for. He understands that he doesn't want to live with someone who spent a year lying to him. Her face changed. You turned him against me. I showed both of them the truth. That's not the same thing. The truth. Her voice went sharp. You mean your version of it. Your curated, 18-month-in-the-making version. It's the documented version, Sandra. Every receipt, every text, every withdrawal. I didn't write any of that. You did. She pressed a hand against the doorframe. I made a mistake. You made a decision. Multiple decisions over multiple months. The word for that isn't mistake. Graham, Elliot. She stopped. I go by Elliot, I said. You know that. You've known that for 16 years. She stared at me. You're not going to give me anything, are you? I'll give you exactly what the court gives you. Cole will have 2 parents. Mi pareja will Mara. They'll have access to you and you'll have time with them. That's what I want for them. But Leon, Cole, will live here because that's what he asked for. You think a judge is going to strip custody from his mother based on the semi pareja of a 13-year-old? I think a judge is going to ask Cole where he wants to live, and Cole is going to answer, and then that judge is going to ask why, and Cole is going to tell him about the affair, about the lies, about every moment he watched you look through me like I wasn't standing there. I kept my voice level. I don't have to coach him. He was there for all of it. She was crying now, not performing, actually crying. I know the difference. I'd been watching her face for 16 years. I love my kids, she said. I know you do. But love that doesn't come with honesty isn't something a 13-year-old can build a life on. I moved to close the door. My attorney will be in touch about the hearing date. Wait, I stopped. Can I talk to him? Just talk to him. That's up to Cole. If he wants to hear from you, he'll reach out. But he's not required to. I paused. And Sandra, don't come back here. Next time I call the police. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade, then the distant sound of the elevator. My phone buzzed. Mara. Mom just called me screaming about the custody filing. Is Cole really moving in? If that's what he wants, yes. A pause. Then, good. He needs to get out of that house. I set the phone on the counter and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved at its ordinary pace, People commuting, people running errands, people doing the ordinary maintenance of lives that hadn't imploded recently. I watched them for a while. For the first time in 16 years, ordinary felt like something I might be allowed back into. The custody hearing was a Tuesday morning in late November. Courtroom 4B, County Family Court. Fluorescent lights, elevated bench. The particular institutional stillness of a room where decisions happen and nobody raises their voice. Sandra sat at the opposite table with Brian Kessler. She dressed carefully, dark suit, minimal jewelry, hair controlled. She looked composed. Her hands, when she reached for her water glass, were not. Cole was in the waiting area outside. He'd requested to address the judge directly, and Dennis had filed the appropriate paperwork. Judge Marilyn Ostroff had 22 years on the bench and a reputation for reading people faster than they realized. Kessler went first. He painted a picture of a devoted mother, PTA involvement, school events, homework support, soccer practices, dinners made and attended, all accurate, all beside the point. Dennis cross-examined. Mrs. Marsh, did you engage in a sustained extramarital relationship with Derek Calloway? Sandra hesitated. Yes, for approximately how long? About 14 months. And during that period, your husband was unaware. Initially, he found out and documented it. Without your knowledge? Yes. No further questions. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. Income documentation. The apartment, the consulting contract, my schedule. I said I wasn't trying to exclude Sandra from the kids' lives. I was trying to give Cole a stable environment he'd specifically asked for. Judge Ostroff called Cole in. He walked to the witness box with his shoulders squared. He looked at the judge and not at Sandra. She asked him why he wanted to live with me. Because my dad has been straight with me, Cole said. My mom hasn't, and I can't live with someone I don't trust. That's a serious thing to say, Judge Ostroff said. It's the truth. He looked at Sandra for a moment. I'm sorry, Mom. I know this hurts, but I can't be there anymore. The judge reviewed the documentation in silence for 15 minutes. When she returned, her face gave nothing away until she opened her mouth. Primary custody of Cole Marsh is awarded to Elliot Marsh, effective immediately. Sandra Marsh will have supervised visitation on alternating weekends, with a review at 6 months pending completion of court-recommended family counseling and demonstration of a stable living environment. Sandra's face broke. Mara Marsh's custody arrangement remains joint, with her expressed preference for weekend visitation with her father documented and respected. Judge Ostroff looked at both of us. This family has been through enough. I expect both parties to prioritize these children's welfare over any remaining personal grievances. Am I understood? We both nodded. Outside the courtroom, Cole found me in the hallway. He didn't say anything. He just walked up and leaned into me the way kids do when they're 13 and trying not to look like they need to be held. Can we go home now? He asked. Yeah, buddy, I said. We can go home. 11 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of a house I'd purchased on the outer edge of town. 3 bedrooms, a yard wide enough for a grill and a folding chair, a driveway where Cole had started shooting baskets on a hoop I'd bolted to the garage wall the first week we moved in. Nothing remarkable, everything we needed. Mara was setting the table for Thanksgiving dinner, home from her first semester of college, moving through my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who'd made herself at home in a place she'd helped choose. Cole was on the couch, textbooks spread across the coffee table, calculator in hand, the specific expression of someone working through a problem he was going to solve. The normalcy of it still caught me sometimes. The way ordinary becomes extraordinary when you've spent years being deprived of it without quite knowing that's what was happening. My consulting work with Victor Shen had expanded, his operation had grown, and I'd taken on a permanent role as his distribution director. Reasonable hours, work that required actual thought, income that gave me room to breathe. Sandra had completed the first phase of her mandated counseling. Her supervised visits with Cole had transitioned to unsupervised, though he still chose to spend most of his time here. Mara saw her occasionally, with the kind of careful, bounded affection that had replaced whatever they'd had before. Derek Calloway had been out of the picture for months. I'd heard through peripheral acquaintances that Sandra had ended it entirely. Whether out of genuine remorse or practical calculation, I couldn't say, and I no longer needed to know. My phone buzzed on the counter. Dennis Farrow. Divorce finalized. All documentation filed. Congrats. I read it twice. Set the phone down. Looked around the kitchen. This wasn't the life I had pictured when I said I do 16 years ago. It wasn't the future I'd imagined in any of the small forward projections you make when you're building something with another person. When the kids are born, when you move into a house, when you plant things in a yard you expect to be in for decades. But it was honest. It was functional. It was mine. And for the first time in longer than I could clearly remember, those three things felt like enough. Mara looked over from the table. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah," I said. "I really am." Cole called from the couch without looking up. "Dad, when do we eat? I'm dying over here." 10 minutes. "That's what you said 20 minutes ago." 12 minutes. Mara laughed. The short, genuine kind. The kind that surprises you into it. "Some things never change. Some things shouldn't," I said. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the kids had retreated to their respective spaces, I sat on the back porch with a beer and watched the sky go through its sequence. Orange at the tree line, then purple overhead, then the deep seamless dark of a November night without much moon. Sandra had said my life would be easier without her. She'd said it as a weapon, the way people deploy the thing they suspect might be true when they want to wound rather than resolve. But she hadn't been entirely wrong. Not easier because she was absent. Easier because I had finally stopped doing the thing I'd been doing for years, waiting. Waiting for her to come back to the marriage she'd already left. Waiting for the dynamic to change on its own. Waiting for the day she'd look at me and see someone worth staying for. I had stopped waiting. And in the space that opened up, I found something I'd mislaced somewhere in year 8 or 9 and spent the remaining years vaguely mourning without ever naming. Myself. Not a version of myself arranged around someone else's indifference. Not a man defined by what he was willing to endure. Just myself. The person who was good at his work and honest with his kids and capable of building something functional and warm in a small house on the outskirts of a city that didn't need me to be anything other than present. The beer was cold. The air smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke from somewhere down the block. Inside, I could hear Cole's music through the ceiling, something low and rhythmic, and the soft sound of Mara on the phone, laughing at something, relaxed in a way she hadn't been a year ago. I sat there for a long time. Then I went back inside, checked that the doors were locked, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. In the morning, everything would still need doing. Cole had a school project due. Mara was flying back to campus Sunday. The job had a new contract to evaluate. The ordinary machinery of a life in motion. I was ready for it. I had been, I realized, for longer than I'd known.